On the eve of the 40th anniversary of the film that changed the world, and one of my all-time favorite movies, I feel the time is right to discuss the book that started it all. This, ladies and gentlemen, is Jaws. Written by Peter Benchley and published in 1974, the story of Jaws is fairly simple. A great white shark begins attacking people off the shores of a New England summer resort, and Police Chief Martin Brody is dead set on stopping the predator. With the aid of marine biologist and shark expert Matt Hooper, along with shark fisherman Quint, they set out to hunt the great white down, but wind up becoming the prey themselves. The book draws inspiration from the 1916 New Jersey incident, when one or more sharks attacked 5 people along the coast of New Jersey over a 2-week period, which resulted in the deaths of 4 and the permanent injury of the 5th. The species of shark was never officially determined, but the best estimates were that it was either a great white or a bull shark. 2 of those fatal attacks occurred in a creek no less, something that might have been taken out of the story as that would seem a little bit too unrealistic. The impact of Jaws on pop culture cannot be underestimated. It was the first film to break the $100 million mark at the box office. It was the original summer blockbuster, and is the primary reason great whites have a bad reputation as man-eaters. I was finally introduced to Jaws while in high school, because at the time I was looking up and watching a bunch of rather silly B-movies featuring monsters on the loose. Movies like Anaconda, Lake Placid, The Ghost in the Darkness, and Tremors. And those were just the good ones. But with me polluting my brain with such stupidity, my mother took me aside and said, "Okay, if you're gonna watch all this junk, you have to at least see the best one." And so we went to the local video store and rented Jaws for the first time. It would not be the last. I went back almost on a weekly basis to rent and watch that movie over and over and over again. And when someone else bought the video store and the movie was put up for sale, I bought it in a heartbeat. But this isn't about the movie, this is about the book, although truth be told, they follow each other rather closely. To begin our examination, let's look at the first thing most people ever see of a book: the cover. I mean, just look at that cover. This has become an iconic image known to just about everybody on Earth. Now, truth be told, this is the cover of the mass-produced paperback. This over here was the original hardback edition. You can see the obvious elements: the swimmer at the top, the shark coming up from below to attack, but the image that has burned itself into the minds of moviegoers and the general public everywhere is the paperback, which would then be used by Universal as the essential movie poster. The book begins with the shark swimming off the shores of Amity Island, a popular summer getaway destination. It finds a young girl, Chrissy Watkins, out in the water in the early morning hours, and proceeds to devour her. She is reported as missing the next day by her friends, and her remains are found on the beach by Chief Brody and his deputy. Brody, upon learning that the most likely cause of death was a shark attack, wants to shut the beaches down until the shark can be caught and killed. But the mayor overrules him and keeps the beaches open, despite the danger this poses. After another attack, this one on 10-year-old boy Alex Kittner, Matt Hooper from the Oceanographic Institute is brought in to give his personal evaluation of the situation, and the story continues to escalate as the shark claims more victims while the city politics bicker on shore. And just so you all know, I am very well aware that this is the second book I've covered on this show that deals with a giant shark. In the movie, Brody is a native of New York and has moved his family out to Amity so that they can be safer, but in the book he is an islander born and raised. Ellen, his wife, however, is not, and a running subplot throughout the book is how she's feeling older and more like her mother and other relatives that she never wants to become. We will see this same sort of subplot in a different book we'll cover later this year. But when Matt Hooper comes to town, she decides she wants to venture out and have a little bit of fun by having an affair with him, an action she later comes to regret, not just for being untrue to her husband, but untrue to herself. This subplot was completely removed from the film, and for good reason. It really has nothing to do with the problem of a giant man-eating shark swimming around, and appears to have just been put in the book mostly for the point of sexing it up. Was that just a thing in the 70s and 80s, or is that just a thing with books about sharks? Because for some reason, the two that we've looked at so far have almost completely random sex scenes in them for no real reason. Maybe it was there so that Hooper and Brody would hate each other more, since in the book, none of the 3 main characters get along that well. A few more things in the book that didn't make the transfer to the big screen included the mayor's real reasons for keeping the beaches open. In the movie, he was trying to act in the town's best interests, as this is a resort community that gets most of its income from the year during the summer months, and especially the 4th of July weekend. In the book, a few more reasons are laid out. Reason 1. The previous summer on Amity had not been a good one, and a few carpentry frauds built shoddy resort buildings and left the folks of Amity to pay the bills, so they really need this summer to be successful in order to make up for the last one. Reason 2. Larry Vaughn, the mayor, has some major outstanding debts to the mob and needs the money generated from tourism to pay them off. These 2 reasons give more credence to why the city council fights so fiercely for the beaches to remain open, even after many people have been killed by the shark. Quint's backstory as a survivor of the USS Indianapolis. a famous World War II ship that was sunk in the Pacific and left the survivors treading water for a week and being attacked by sharks while they waited for rescue, is not in the book. Without it, Quint goes from being a tormented, driven man to a simple shark hunter, and, frankly, makes him less interesting. After the third or fourth shark attack, the town council finally decides that the shark situation needs to be sorted out. They hire Quint at a rate of $200 a day to track down and kill the shark, with Brody and Hooper coming along with him for the ride, and eventually the final confrontation with Jaws. So, what score would I give this book? Well, that's kind of difficult to say. While it was a bestseller at the time, and Peter Benchley's career as a writer did take off, most of his future works seem to have a very similar theme, almost as if he couldn't quite escape the legacy of this book. And to an extent, he couldn't. He later came to regret writing Jaws because of the impact it had on the great white population, and the detrimental effect it had on all sharks across the world. He became an ocean conservationist to try to make up for the impact that his book caused. As a Jaws fanboy, I'm under obligation to read it, but I can't give this book too high of a score. The subplots are tedious and the characters are more ornery and less sympathetic than in the film, but the sequences with the shark are fun and exciting. I give this one a rating of 2 3/4 stars. I don't often hand out quarter stars, but I'll make an exception. It's better than The Predators, but not as good as some of the other books we have later this year. If you really want to read it, absolutely do. But this is one of those few examples of when the film is better than the book.